Hello all, and welcome to a brand new theory series surrounding the new FNaF DLC, Ruin. In this series, we're going to try and explain as much as we possibly can, not just about Ruin, but also Security Breach and the history of the Mega Pizzaplex. The information that we got from Ruin seems to really tie together a lot of the questions we had before, so let's just get right in. In this video, we're going to be focusing solely on the Mimic. Let's start with the information we got in Ruin. This Mimic, also called Old Endo by the game's files, was luring Cassie down into the old pizzeria from Pizzeria Simulator to break it out and set it free. Now, there are a few questions we need to ask right off the bat. For one, what is the Mimic and how did it get here? To answer this question, we need to turn to the books. Now, a little disclaimer about the books. We don't know if they are 100% canon, so we won't go exactly off what they say. However, we know these stories were written to bring forth ideas from the games and fully flesh them out, so we will use main ideas from these books to help with our theory. We can also trust these stories quite a bit for one big reason. There used to be a message on the books stating that they were set in the world of the new and upcoming Freddy games, but this message was unfortunately removed. However, an email with Scholastic stated that even though this message was removed, it's only a change in marketing strategy and doesn't affect the content of the series. This is why we will be using these books quite a bit in our theory. Now that this disclaimer is out of the way, let's get into the Mimic's backstory. In the story, The Mimic, we learned that this animatronic was created by Edwin Murray. Edwin is an engineer that was hired by Fazbear Entertainment. The Mimic was meant to imitate behaviors that it witnessed from his son, David, in an effort to keep him entertained. But when his son dies, Edwin attacks the Mimic in a fit of rage, which the Mimic then imitates, leading to a spree of murders. The Mimic was then obtained by Fazbear Entertainment and its code was analyzed. The software running the Mimic was called Mimic 1. That story ends there, but we next need to turn to the Nexi book's epilogue. In this story, a character looks at a journal that belonged to a Fazbear Entertainment engineer. The journal mentions that the Mimic Endos were mass-produced by Fazbear Entertainment to attempt to cut back on the need to program animatronics. Instead, these Mimic Endos would imitate what they saw of a specific animatronic. However, this idea turned south. These mimics began becoming violent. As stated in the journal, these endos were all eventually deactivated. Well, all except for one. For some reason, the original Mimic stayed active. Fazbear Entertainment sealed it behind cement underneath the old pizzeria. It was locked away along with 3 various types of mascot costumes that it used to wear. Now, a problem with controlling the Mimic is that Fazbear Entertainment used it a lot. They may have tried to shut down all physical versions of the hardware, but they've screwed themselves even more than they thought. Rumors were circling around through many people, and it was destroying Fazbear Entertainment's reputation. Games were created that highlighted many tragic events in this company's history. As a response, they created a virtual reality experience to clear their name and reputation. We know this experience as FNaF VR Help Wanted. Now, Fazbear being Fazbear, they scanned circuit boards belonging to the Mimics to speed up the process of programming the animatronics' AIs. And of course, this didn't work out for them. As a result of the Mimic being in the system, an unknown error started forming into a full-blown anomaly. This anomaly began mimicking the main antagonist of the series, William Afton, and has become known as Glitch Trap. It was initially found by Tape Girl, who attempted to isolate the anomaly to prevent it from becoming whole again. But as we play the game and collect the tapes, we reform this anomaly back into Glitch Trap, but listening to the Tape Girl's instructions, are able to destroy it. Just looking at Help Wanted, we can see how unsuccessful Fazbear Entertainment was at destroying the Mimic program. And unfortunately for them, it doesn't seem to end there. Somehow, in Ruin, we see that the Mimic has done quite a few things in its time down in the old pizzeria. Somehow, it's been able to hear and learn from the events of Security Breach to not only feed some of those exact lines from the game back to Cassie, but to learn from those lines and create full new sentences posing as different characters. Now, our big question is, how could it possibly have heard us while being locked down in the old pizzeria? Well, first, let's prove that it absolutely did hear us from Security Breach. We can easily use the evidence from Ruin, where the Mimic feeds us back the lines that we heard in Security Breach. Some of the lines we hear from the Gregory Mimic, or Grimmick, are lines we heard in Security Breach. There's this line from Gregory.
I'm Gregory. I'm Gregory.
And also this line, which was one of the first sentences we heard from the Mimic in Ruin.
Freddy, are you there? I'm trapped. Are you there? I'm trapped.
So, if the Mimic did hear the events of Security Breach, how could this be possible with it being locked away? Well, to answer that question, we'll need to start by looking at the story called The Storyteller. In The Storyteller, we are shown a version of the Mimic 1 program, the same program run by the original Mimic, controlling the entire Pizzaplex and animatronics. While this was done to liven up the Pizzaplex, it began to have negative effects, especially on the animatronics. Roxanne Wolf's teasing becomes cruel, Glamrock Chica's gluttonous nature was replaced with an obsession for attention, Mr. Cupcake has become more aggressive, and Monty Gator has turned violent. It is also stated that other animatronics experience a similar shift. This parallels a lot of what we see in the games. Roxy is not teasing anyone, but instead is very cruel and aggressive. Monty Gator is extremely violent, destroying the gates and staff bots and creating slash marks in the walls. Glamrock Chica is the only one that's kind of different, but instead of having an obsession for attention, it seems that her gluttonous nature has become a lot more intense. It's gotten to such a point that it's the way that she gets shattered. She goes so crazy over pizza and the Monty Mystery Mix that it's how we lure her to her destruction. We even see Mr. Cupcake being aggressive during Ruin when he pushes us off the conveyor belt. There are a few more strange shifts that we see in the game that aren't as obvious. For one, the daycare attendant isn't acting as it should be. The animatronic of Sun and Moon didn't actually start as a daycare attendant. It instead began as a character in the Fazbear Theater. It was Sun and its dark evil side of Moon. Now, when the animatronic was reprogrammed and repurposed as the daycare attendant, the Moon wasn't supposed to keep triggering, but it kept doing so. The techs couldn't explain why Moon kept triggering, and it was a persistent glitch that remained in the program until they gave up and accepted it. They instead began counteracting it by making sure the lights would always stay on in the daycare, using generators to keep power flowing, but even that didn't work sometimes. Even the staff bots themselves began acting stranger. In Security Breach, we receive a duffel bag message called Recycled Pizza that tells us the pizza being given to the customers are sometimes a weird jumbled combination of various different slices of various different shapes and sizes. The parallels don't end here. Even the endos themselves act shockingly similar to the Mimic program. We can see that all the endos are shaped after Freddy, yet they move like the various animatronics. We can see them walking like Chica, Monty, and Roxy, even though these are clearly all shaped like Freddy. While I don't think that the storyteller tree was in our Pizzaplex that Security Breach takes place in, these parallels are very clear and very obvious. The strange glitches and occurrences that we see and hear about in the games are the exact same as the effects of the Mimic 1 program controlling a Pizzaplex. This shows us that somehow our original Mimic that's locked away in the old pizzeria is controlling the Mega Pizzaplex. Now that we know for sure that the old Endo Mimic has somehow taken minor control of our Pizzaplex, we can start finding other examples of its control. One of the new mechanics that we are introduced to in Ruin is the Vanny mask. This mask is the virtual augmented neural network integration that is used by level 5 technicians. Interestingly, when wearing the Vanny mask, we can hear various whispers of the animatronics in our area. Funnily enough, if you listen very closely to these whispers, they are quotes from the original Security Breach game. It would make no sense for these characters to say these lines. We ripped out Chica's voice box when she was shattered, and Freddy doesn't have a head. This is the exact same scenario as hearing Gregory even though he's not there. The Mimic is impersonating not just Gregory, but the animatronics as well. Now, one of the interesting features in this AR system is a virtual assistant named Helpie. This assistant would help the technicians throughout their job. We can see Helpie speaking to us as a little avatar of a blue-eyed Helpie wearing a blue jumpsuit and some electronic additions. However, there seems to be something weird happening with it. Every now and then, we get a corrupted version of Helpie, which has yellow eyes and either a crack or a vein on the side of its head. All of the cutouts of Helpie in the Pizzaplex show it with the normal blue eyes, so something seems weird about our yellow-eyed Helpie. Let's look at how it speaks to us. When blue-eyed Helpie communicates with us, it's through objective facts. It doesn't add any subjective remarks. Yellow-eyed Helpie, however, seems to use manipulation tactics on Cassie. When walking up to the electrified door in Monty Golf, blue-eyed Helpie pops up to tell us that the door is in emergency lockdown mode and that we should check the AR world for active security nodes. Right after, yellow-eyed Helpie pops up to tell us to deactivate those nasty nodes. This is completely different from how Helpie was talking to us earlier. Not only this, but at one point, the Mimic, as Gregory, even responds to something that Helpie says. After the entity is removed in the catwalks of Gator Golf, yellow-eyed Helpie says that it took care of the area and it's now safe. Right after, Gregory on the walkie-talkie chimes in to respond with the fact that Gregory helped. At this point, we know that the Gregory we talked to on the walkie-talkie is not real Gregory, but the Mimic. This not only tells us that the Mimic has access to our Vanny mask, but is also mimicking our helpful Helpie, feeding us malicious instructions directly. But why would the Mimic be feeding us instructions? Well, it's telling us to deactivate the nasty security nodes, going all the way down to where the Mimic is hiding. In this area, we can see the origin of the Mexis software, or what we know as the Entity. This software is a security protocol that protects the servers and Pizzaplex from anomalous and threatening code and malicious actions in the digital world. This means that whatever the Mimic does, the Mexis software attempts to remove, as we see happen with us throughout the game. Not only this, but the Mexis software is also keeping the door closed that leads to the Mimic. If it wants to break free, which it does, it first has to deactivate that pesky Mexis. If we didn't believe that the yellow-eyed Helpie was the Mimic from the last piece of evidence, we can add something else to the pile. When we are first introduced to the intercom system, blue-eyed helpie tells us how to use it. Once Cassie utilizes it, she hears that it sounds exactly like herself. Afterwards, yellow-eyed helpie pops up, telling us that he created it using samples from her voice. This is already a common tactic of the Mimic, but we also use Gregory's voice over the intercom as well, as seen here.
Hello? Hello? I'm so scared. Here I am.
The intercom system is using Gregory's voice, and the only way to know about our connection with Gregory is with this being connected to the Mimic. The same animatronic that's pretending to be Gregory by using samples of his voice is doing the exact same thing over the intercom system connected to the cameras, which yellow-eyed helpie said he was influencing. So, we've just uncovered a lot of information about the Mimic itself. We know its origin, created by Edward and obtained by Fazbear, became a mass-produced system that was even ported to virtual reality, but was discontinued and shut down after violent tendencies. While many of the Mimics were disabled, the original Mimic and the Mimic software in the virtual reality experience remained intact. The Mimic was able to gain access to the Pizzaplex that was built above it, and the various animatronics and robots suffered as a result. The Mexis program kept it at bay and locked inside of its little room until it was able to send a message to Cassie to get her to explore the Pizzaplex. Posing as Gregory, the Mimic manipulated Cassie into shutting down the Mexis and setting the Mimic free. Now, while we did explain a lot here, there are still a lot of questions to be answered. How did the Mimic gain access to the Pizzaplex in the first place? Where does Vanny and Gregory fit into this story? Is there more happening here than we think? All these questions will be answered in the next video. There is just so much to talk about related to the Mimic that I can't do it all in one video. Well, on that note, thank you all so much for watching this video. Make sure you ring that bell icon after subscribing to be notified when I upload next, as you'll want to stay updated for this theory series. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, and if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe. If you want to talk to my team and I directly, make sure to join our Discord or check out our subreddit. Make sure to check out RemGames live on Twitch, as I stream there every now and then and on special occasions. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.